Whiskers wasn't just a cat. He was a connoisseur of cleanliness, a maestro of meticulousness, a champion of tidiness. His fur, a shimmering silver, was brushed twice daily, each strand aligned with military precision. His whiskers, long and elegant, never drooped. His paws, soft and white, remained unsullied by so much as a speck of dust. Whiskers surveyed his domain, the sun-drenched living room, with an approving gaze. Every cushion on the plush velvet sofa was fluffed to perfection. The antique rug, a tapestry of intricate patterns, was free of stray hairs or crumbs. Even the potted fern in the corner looked impeccably green, its leaves wiped clean of any residue. Ah, another magnificent morning, Whiskers purred, stretching luxuriously on his custom-made silk sleeping pillow. His life was a symphony of order, a ballet of blissful neatness. His days consisted of napping in sunbeams, contemplating the deeper meanings of dust motes, and engaging in light, dignified play with his favorite, perfectly spherical yarn ball, one that he meticulously rolled back into its basket after each session. Chaos was a foreign concept, a disturbance he simply didn't tolerate. Just then, a thud rattled the window pane. Whiskers' ears swiveled, his tail twitched with irritation. Next door, the old, quiet house had been empty for months, a peaceful extension of his own orderly existence. But now, boxes were being unloaded, and a cacophony of unfamiliar sounds echoed through the air. A shiver of unease rippled through his perfectly groomed fur. Change, Whiskers mused, was almost always a messy business. His worst fears were confirmed that afternoon. A moving van rumbled away, revealing a small, furry blur bounding across the newly manicured lawn. It was a puppy, no bigger than a fluffy dust bunny with floppy ears and a tail that wagged with enough enthusiasm to power a small windmill. This, Whiskers deduced with a sinking feeling, must be Pounce. Pounce, oblivious to the meticulous gaze fixed upon him, immediately spotted a discarded leaf and pounced on it, scattering dirt. Then he rolled, happily churning up fresh grass. Whiskers watched, horrified, as Pounce then spotted a muddy puddle and with a joyful yip, splashed right through it. The new neighbor was a walking, wagging, mud-tracking disaster. The next morning, Whiskers awoke to a nightmare. Through the open window, a muddy paw print smudged his pristine windowsill. Pounce, a veritable whirlwind of energy, was already out in his yard, digging a hole with unbridled glee, scattering clumps of earth everywhere. Whiskers shuddered. This wasn't just a neighbor. This was an invasion of personal space, a direct threat to his cherished tidiness. He spent the entire morning scrubbing the windowsill, muttering about uncivilized canines. Later that day, Whiskers settled down for his post-lunch nap, his silver fur shimmering in the sunlight. Suddenly, a small, squeaky toy bounced off his nose, followed by a loud woof. Pounce, having somehow found a way to squeeze under the fence, was now in his yard, wagging his tail furiously, dropping a slobbery, mutt-stained tennis ball right onto Whiskers' favorite napping spot. Whiskers recoiled, his fur bristling. This was war, a very messy war. The pristine peace of Whiskers' home was swiftly replaced by a symphony of thunks, yips, and the alarming sound of rapidly unspooling yarn. Pounce, it seemed, had mastered the art of fence crawling. Every morning brought a new, inventive chaos. One Tuesday, Whiskers discovered his favorite sunbeam napping spot, occupied by a napping Pounce, who had somehow tracked mud onto the very center of his silk pillow. Whiskers spent an hour attempting to air out the pillow, glaring daggers at the sleeping pup next door. The following day, Whiskers had carefully arranged his collection of decorative pine cones on the mantelpiece, admiring their symmetrical beauty. Within minutes, a blur of golden fur launched itself from the sofa, sending pine cones scattering like furry projectiles. Pounce, mistaking them for an invitation to play, pranced around with a pine cone clamped triumphantly in his jaws before dropping it, slobbery and chewed, onto Whiskers' clean paws. Whiskers recoiled with a theatrical gasp. His morning grooming routine, once a serene ritual, became a high-stakes obstacle course. As Whiskers meticulously brushed his silver coat, Pounce would inevitably appear at the window, tail wagging furiously, inviting him to play. Whiskers, desperate for peace, would try to ignore him, but Pounce's enthusiastic yips often startled him, resulting in a misdirected brushstroke. Or worse, a clump of perfectly good fur snagged in the bristles. One particularly trying afternoon, Whiskers decided to enjoy a quiet, contemplative moment with a fresh bowl of water, admiring his reflection. Before he could take a single sip, Pounce's eager snout nudged the bowl from behind, sending water sloshing over the edges and soaking Whiskers' front paws. Pounce, thinking it was a new game, began playfully splashing in the puddle, sending more droplets onto Whiskers' face. Whiskers, dripping and dismayed, let out a frustrated hiss. Even the garden, Whiskers' last bastion of tranquility, was not safe. He watched in horror as Pounce, with surprising speed, dug a series of enthusiastic holes around Whiskers' prize-winning petunias, flinging dirt onto the delicate blossoms. Whiskers tried chasing him away with indignant meows, but Pounce merely thought it was a fun new game of chase, barking happily as he dodged the furious feline. Whiskers ended up covered in dirt, his horticultural dreams crushed. Whiskers tried everything. He put up little warning signs, "No puppies allowed," which Pounce probably couldn't read. He attempted stern glares, which Pounce responded to with happy tail wags. He even tried pretending to be a statue, which Pounce interpreted as an invitation to climb on him. Whiskers' once immaculate world was spiraling into a fluffy, chaotic mess. His fur was no longer perfectly aligned, his naps were constantly interrupted, and his dignity felt permanently ruffled. He longed for the blissful silence and order of his past life. This puppy pandemonium simply couldn't continue. He needed a plan, a clever, cat-like strategy to restore his kingdom of calm. Driven to distraction, Whiskers knew he couldn't simply endure Pounce's chaotic presence. He needed a strategy, a feline master plan. His first brilliant idea, Operation Invisible Fence. He meticulously gathered all his scratching posts, stacking them to form an imposing barrier across his favorite sunbeam. If Pounce couldn't see the sunbeam, he couldn't nap in it, right? Whiskers settled back, smugly watching. Moments later, Pounce, oblivious, simply bounded over the posts, scattered them like bowling pins, and landed with a happy thump precisely in the sunbeam, snoring contentedly. Whiskers sighed. Plan A, failure. Next, Whiskers devised Operation Noise Nuisance Neutralizer. Knowing Pounce's love for squeaky toys, Whiskers gathered every single one he could find from under the sofa and in forgotten corners. He placed them all in a sturdy cardboard box, taped it shut with surprising feline dexterity, and hid it deep within the darkest, least accessible cupboard. No squeaks, no play, Whiskers reasoned with a nod. But Pounce had an uncanny sense for toys. Within the hour, Whiskers heard muffled thumping from the cupboard. Soon, Pounce emerged, tail wagging, holding a slightly chewed but still squeaky rubber chicken in his mouth. He'd gnawed through the tape and freed a toy. Plan B? Utterly defeated. His most ambitious scheme was Operation Scent-Free Sanctuary. Whiskers was convinced that Pounce was attracted by his superior, freshly groomed scent. So he decided to mask it. He rolled in every patch of catnip he could find, hoping the overwhelming aroma would deter the puppy. He then tried to create a no-go zone by dabbing lemon juice, which cats despise, around the perimeter of his napping area. He presented himself, smelling like a strange, citrusy catnip bouquet. Pounce, however, seemed intrigued. He sniffed Whiskers' hind leg, let out a confused woof, then playfully sneezed, spraying Whiskers with puppy slobber. Plan C, a sticky, smelly disaster. Whiskers' woes seemed endless. He tried ignoring Pounce entirely, but the puppy's persistent nudges and playful nips made it impossible. He attempted to outsmart him with intricate routes around the house, only to find Pounce waiting on the other side, tail wagging, ready for a game of chase. Whiskers even tried communicating his displeasure through increasingly dramatic sighs and exaggerated eye rolls. But Pounce simply tilted his head, a picture of innocent confusion. The house, once a haven of order, was now a whirlwind of scattered toys, mud paw prints, and half-chewed slippers. Whiskers' beautiful silver fur always seemed to have a stray puppy hair clinging to it. His calm demeanor was replaced by a perpetual state of exasperation. He sat on the highest bookshelf, perched precariously watching Pounce happily wrestling with a pile of freshly laundered towels. "This simply cannot continue," Whiskers muttered to himself, his whiskers drooping. He was running out of wacky plans, and his perfect, peaceful life felt like a distant, unsullied dream. Whiskers was having a particularly dreadful day. A rogue gust of wind had scattered his meticulously organized feather collection. And then, to add insult to injury, a stubborn dust bunny had mysteriously appeared right under his nose during his afternoon nap. He was grumbling about the injustices of the universe when he heard a panicked yelp from the yard next door. It wasn't Pounce's usual playful bark. This was a sound of genuine distress. Peering through the window, Whiskers saw a small, terrified bird trapped in a tangle of thorny rose bushes. Its wing was caught, and it fluttered helplessly, chirping frantically. Pounce was there, too, pawing at the bush, whimpering, clearly wanting to help, but unsure how. He nudged the bush gently with his nose, then tried to dig around its base, getting his paws tangled in the thorns himself. He looked up at Whiskers with wide, worried eyes, a look Whiskers had never seen before. For the first time, Pounce wasn't being mischievous. He was genuinely distressed and trying to be helpful. "Whiskers, despite himself, felt a pang of something other than annoyance. He watched Pounce try to reach the bird, getting pricked by the thorns. Pounce whined, but he didn't give up. He barked urgently, looking between the trapped bird and Whiskers' window, as if asking for assistance. A flicker of an idea, uncharacteristically messy, sparked in Whiskers' mind. He darted out the cat flap, surprising Pounce, who yelped once more, then watched bewildered as Whiskers surveyed the scene. The thorns were too sharp for Pounce's clumsy paws and too spiky for Whiskers' delicate ones. But Whiskers noticed a loose branch lying nearby, a long, sturdy one that had fallen from the old oak tree. It was covered in moss and bits of dirt. Everything Whiskers usually abhorred. "All right, Pounce," Whiskers meowed, a hint of his usual imperiousness in his voice, but softened by urgency. "We need leverage, distraction." Pounce, seemingly understanding the shift in Whiskers' tone, tilted his head. "You distract the thorns," Whiskers instructed, pointing to a particularly dense part of the bush with his paw. Pounce, with surprising focus, began to playfully pounce at the thorniest parts, yipping and drawing the bird's attention away, while Pounce provided a noisy, if clumsy, distraction. Whiskers carefully maneuvered the long branch. He used it to gently, slowly nudge the branch that held the bird's wing. It was tricky, requiring precision he usually reserved for landing perfectly on the sofa. Dirt from the branch fell onto his pristine fur. A small twig brushed his whiskers. He ignored it. His focus was entirely on the struggling bird. Finally, with a gentle push, the thorny branch shifted. The bird fluttered free, gave a relieved chirp, and soared into the sky. Pounce let out a triumphant bark, jumping excitedly, his tail wagging so hard his whole body wiggled. Whiskers, despite the new smudges on his fur and the faint smell of dirt, felt a strange warmth spread through him. He looked at Pounce, who was now covered in bits of leaves and dirt from his distraction work. And for the first time, he didn't see a mess. He saw a friend, a very rough but surprisingly right friend. From that day on, something shifted in Whiskers' world. The meticulously scrubbed windowsill still got paw prints, but now Whiskers simply wiped them with a resigned, almost fond sigh. The pine cones still got knocked off the mantelpiece, but he no longer reacted with a dramatic gasp. Instead, he patiently rearranged them, sometimes even nudging one towards Pounce for a playful chase. The squeaky toys, once banished, now found their way back into the living room, often landing near Whiskers' napping spot. A silent invitation to play. Whiskers still enjoyed his peaceful sunbeam naps and his perfectly groomed fur. But he also discovered a new kind of joy, the kind that came with a little chaos. He learned that a rumpled rug meant a good wrestling match had just taken place. A scattered feather or two implied a thrilling game of Hunt the Elusive Plume. And a slightly damp forehead meant he'd received a genuine, slobbery puppy kiss. He even started participating in Pounce's games, albeit in his own dignified way. He'd swat at Pounce's wagging tail as the puppy zoomed past, or playfully pounce on Pounce's shadow during their outdoor adventures. Their days were now a blend of Whiskers' calm contemplation and Pounce's boundless energy. Whiskers would sometimes nap with Pounce curled up beside him, the puppy's gentle snores a surprisingly comforting sound. One afternoon, Whiskers was attempting to teach Pounce the art of dignified napping. Pounce, naturally, kept twitching and dreaming of chasing squirrels. "One must be utterly still, Pounce," Whiskers instructed, demonstrating a flawless, statue-like pose. Pounce watched for a moment, then let out a happy yip, promptly rolling over and kicking Whiskers squarely in the nose with a fuzzy paw. Whiskers stumbled back, letting out a disgruntled meow. But instead of irritation, the small, genuine chuckle rumbled in his chest. He swatted Pounce's ear playfully, and Pounce responded with a joyous bark, launching into a game of chase around the sofa. Their humans, observing the newfound camaraderie, often shook their heads and smiled. The house was undoubtedly messier, a delightful jumble of cat toys and dog bones, but it was also filled with more laughter, more warmth, and the comforting sounds of two very different but very happy friends. Whiskers learned that while order was nice, life was truly richer when shared with someone, and even if that someone brought a little delightful pandemonium into it. His fur might not always be pristine, and his days might not always be perfectly planned, but they were certainly filled with more fun. And for Whiskers, the once persnickety cat, that was a perfectly wonderful lesson to learn.